Good morning. It's great to see you and great to be here. Also, obviously, great to see Barbara Ferrer, a former leader that I got to serve with during my prior service with the city. So it's exciting to be here and talk a little bit about a few key topics. Probably wondering, why is there a planner here at the meeting about public health and resiliency? I can certainly say that when I was working at City of Detroit, during the outbreak of the pandemic, and I was working to identify non-congregate shelter for all the people who were in the city, along with the leader of the housing departments and the state agencies involved. I felt very much like I was in the public health business then. And as I've had a chance to work at HUD, I would also reflect that I found that I was also working in public health then, not just because of the homeless response, but also because of the work that my section of the agency did on the matter of disaster recovery and the work we were doing with communities on disaster recovery. So at any rate, I want to walk through a few slides with you, but the basic elements are, I got 3 points to talk about today. One is blight, decadence, and substandard housing. Those are the 3 things that the BPDA was chartered to attack. Our goal to have 800,000 people reside in this city in 2050. And the partnership we need with the development industry around the key issues of resilience, affordability, and equity in order for us to make progress. I'll try to specifically highlight the ways that resilience are critical to that. First, I want to give you a little primer on what's special and unique about Boston and the Boston Planning and Development Agency. So our post-World War II story, like many American cities, it does include some decline and disinvestment, and importantly, a flight from the city, primarily by the white families and population. Our population was at its peak in modern history of 800,000 in 1950, and it went down to 500,000 by 1980. Our recent history is more one of resurgence, but to understand a little bit more about the agency that we've got and the way that resilience is part of it, we have to go back to 1957. At that time, this Commonwealth and the city joined together to basically charter a new public agency, the Boston Redevelopment Authority, whose job was to attack blight, decadence, and substandard housing, and implement what were deemed to be modern planning techniques and approaches. Boston and the state sort of chartered it together. I would say that for those who don't know what those techniques at that time were, Ed Logue was different than Robert Moses and others, but many of the approaches to parkways, highways, clearance of substandard housing and replacement with international style housing development was really the core of what they were advancing. The city at that time was desperate for private investment. Everywhere from the Globe to other newspapers said that we were a backwater and were unable to sort of foster development. The sort of nadir of this trend was the clearance of the West End, which has been seen sort of historically as one of the most egregious examples of using urban renewal powers to advance, again, removal of blight, decadence, and substandard housing, but also a major mistake, taking a mixed income, multi-generational, multiracial neighborhood in the city and wiping it out. So following the elimination of that neighborhood, Scollay Square, the New York Streets neighborhoods, and a few other places, the pushback on the redevelopment agency was relentless, and it resulted in a real redirection of that agency's work, along with, I have to cover some of these topics, I'm sorry, I got to catch up. So you'll have to see some of the more egregious examples and photos of clearance that exist here. This is a little bit of the taste of the pushback that resulted in much more affordable housing, public parks, schools, and other municipal services. So on those foundations, the city has become the modern city that it is. The same charter of having the agency work carefully to drive development forward while absorbing the lessons of these early ventures in urban renewal and redevelopment. It's really the basis of why the city has the strength that it does, and not just in the downtown, but increasingly in neighborhoods. I think the key thing to focus on and where resilience comes in, and this is a picture of Mayor Wu on Morrissey Boulevard, is that the charge of the agency in 1957 and 1960 was to make us a competitive place again and to drive forward development, going after those three things: blight, decadence, and substandard housing. If you had to say what the next 60 years of growth and development are really going to be gated and bounded by, you would probably focus on different things. For our city, in the particular circumstance we're in now, we believe those things are resilience, affordability, and equity. Those are the things that really are going to create boundaries for us in the way that we grow. The threat to the city that I think you read about most has to do with housing and the affordability of housing and the inability of us to compete against other places with lower cost housing, but similar kinds of knowledge industries. Take, for example, the Research Triangle area, North Carolina, places like that. So if we're going to actually grow, we've got to find a way to make peace with these three, with those three things. We have to find a way to have our charter to advance affordability, equity, and resilience. Those are the ways we're going to do it. So the threats of housing sort of also has a sort of more important threat behind it. If we can't have housing affordable in our community, the workforce that drives every aspect of this city forward isn't going to reside here. They're going to choose one of the other places. So the approach we're taking to get these things is to focus on how do we attract and then maintain a population of 800,000 people. This goal allows us to sort of indicate how acting to develop resilience, acting to develop affordability, and acting to create equity are the ways that we're going to get and attract those 800,000 people. Since the city hasn't been 800,000 people really since in the post-civil rights era, and so what it's going to take to actually create that environment is really making our sort of social contract and our development agenda the same. It means that we're going to need to focus on where there's development possibility that is near the water's edge. We've got to prioritize ways to protect those investments and make sure that the growth is going to be here for past 2070 and further, and that's built for an adapted coastline that we're going to have to be protected. We're also going to have to make sure that as we are building those 800,000, building to accommodate and support the 800,000 people, that we're growing in a way that creates affordability. And again, not just conventional affordability in the sense of income-restricted units, but enough supply that's reliably being generated to make sure that we have a supply of housing. And finally, in terms of creating equity, we got to find ways to create value that create value for people, so that every participant in our city that's been growing is able to benefit from that investment. So we don't do this work alone. We're the private sector, we're the public sector. We need the private sector to help us to achieve these goals. So what we're going to be doing, and these slides sort of give you a little bit of a sense of some of the issues that we're going to be addressing that I spoke to a few moments ago. The Mattapan project is a great example of a place where we're focusing on equity and the development of accessory dwelling units, for example. Again, I'll just finish up going through these slides quickly and just end here because I know my time's probably coming to an end. We need a new relationship with our development industry if we're going to be successful at doing this. And what that means is recognizing that while the challenges in front of the city require more capital to be addressed, we have the resources among us to provide that capital. In exchange for providing that capital through things like some of the programs and policies the city already has, we need to make it easier to do business and easier to do business the right way. We need to make it very clear what we mean by resilience and the kind of investments we'll be expecting to do that. We need to make it very clear what we mean and speed the plow for any project that's able to meet any of those three thresholds. So with that, I would only add one other thing, which is I know I'm here at a university for a reason. We need the best minds in the public sector. If you're interested in change, the public sector is one of the places it happens, and one of the places that when it happens, we can drive the private sector to do great things as well. So as you are thinking about, the people who are listening, thinking about what they want to do next, please consider us at the BPDA.